Hey everybody, welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 450 being recorded on, I don't know the answer to this, May 17th? All right, 2017. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
I want to apologize for a few things. One, video quality. Two, audio quality of me in particular. Everybody else seems to be doing just fine. It looks fantastic. You guys are doing just fantastic.
And three, Josh Walrath.
Well, just the general content.
Also, if you're not a fan of like AMD news, it's going to be a very bad show for you because it's pretty much all we have to talk about. Actually, there's a lot of other stuff too, but we may end up cutting a whole bunch at the end, depending on how much we talk about the AMD news that occurred this week. But rather than waste time and tell you about my week of being in Disney World and now at the beach trying to finish all stuff, to be fair, I had not planned on being on tonight's show because I didn't realize how much stuff AMD was actually going to show and talk about at their Financial Analyst Day, which I thought was supposed to be about like finances and not product launches. But I guess I've been corrected in that regard. So let's go ahead and start talking about stuff. First of all, obviously, we do record the show live in this fantastic quality that you see here at pcper.com/live. And we do it normally at starting kind of trying to be at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Tonight was a little later because I was late getting into our hotel or whatever for this trip. So I apologize for that. But if you need a reminder, normally we send out an email through pcper.com/subscribe, which you can see right here. We just ask your name and your email address. We send you notifications when we do live streams, assuming that we know when they're going to start. Tonight, we didn't really know when it was going to start, so we didn't send one out. So I apologize for that, but there you go. And also, of course, we have our Patreon campaign running. And now you'll probably hear some background noise from the air conditioning unit that decided to turn on behind me. The patreon.com/pcperf, that's the URL for that. That is your ability to become a monthly contributor to us. If you like what we do, if you're running an ad blocker and you feel guilty about it because all those articles you read, all the information you get from people like us, those of us on the podcast and the other writers at the site, this is your way you can donate. $1 a month, $3, $5, $10, $20, whatever you want to do. We greatly appreciate everybody that does that, especially in recent weeks and months, as it becomes painfully apparent that comment whores and poor people that have nothing better to do, that they just have no high self-esteem, so they wanted to comment on everything all the time, we're an increasing amount of page views. And also there's Josh there.
Yeah.
It's an interesting picture. So anyway, we greatly appreciate that. We highly encourage it, obviously. And if you want to subscribe during the show, I will see your email come across on my phone, and I will call out your name on the show as we go. So there you have that. So let's jump into the content. Before we get into the actual AMD announcements that occurred this week, I want to talk to you about a story that I wrote up and published just yesterday that dives a little bit deeper into that kind of recurring problem, that this stickler issue that the Ryzen platform and processors have with standard peak gaming. It's an important issue. It was something that was brought up to AMD before launch, during launch. It comes up during their analyst calls, during their financial calls. So clearly, despite what some commenters feel like, that this is a non-issue, if AMD is addressing it during financial analyst calls, it's a big issue. And so we did a little bit more digging into just trying to figure out why this occurs, right? Alan and me and Ken and others have done work already trying to figure out like what is some of the root cause of these different things. That graph you're looking at there is something we discovered through a ping tool that like does thread-to-thread communications. And we found this huge discrepancy between CCX to CCX ping times versus on the same die ping times, or on the same module ping times, which kind of led us down the idea of, memory latency on the Ryzen platform is very different than what exists on Intel platforms. And so what happened is, somebody suggested to me, like, hey, you should profile these different applications and see what these workloads are actually diving into. Actually, that's a good thing, the graph to show right here. This is actually Sysoft Sandra standard memory latency test. We go into details about what the 3 different versions are: random, in-page, and sequential in the story. You should read that. But clearly this shows, at the full random, you're looking at something along the lines of 56% slower or so. But on the in-page, you're looking at more like 3.6 times slower latency. So in this graph, lower is better. Intel A700K versus the Ryzen 7 1800X. And then we use another tool as well, the Intel Memory Latency Checker. This is kind of like a sanity check. It's kind of in the middle of those 2 results. So interesting data point there. Josh, do you remember any particular architectural discrepancy like this as we went along over the last decade or more, where the latency of one was so different than the other?
Hold on. Ryan, you just dropped to real media quality.
Yeah. Real bad.
Turn off my video. Let's turn it off.
Turn it all off.
I will do that. There we go. So now you get no video from me. You're going to look at a still shot of me on a beach.
That's actually getting better pretty quickly now.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, Josh.
AMD has always had a problem with latency. I don't know if it's called really a problem, but in every measurable aspect, from L1 to L2 caches to main memory, they've always been slower than Intel. And this goes back seemingly since forever. And I'm not entirely sure why. They tune it pretty well. And the only time they really ever beat Intel in that was the original Athlon 64, where they put the memory controller on the die.
Oh, yeah.
And Intel was still working with the 775 platform that featured, the memory controller on the North Bridge, and you had to go through the GTL Plus bus, and that added a ton of latency. But, in terms of caches and bandwidth to them, Intel has always had a pretty good advantage. And once the memory controller got moved to the CPU for Intel, they've just kind of ruled the roost, at least in that aspect.
All right. So one of the tools that we had access to is called VTune. Now, this is an application made by Intel, and obviously this is going to create a stir. All VTune does is it profiles the applications on the system, right? So you run an application in the background, you play your game or whatever other benchmark or application you want to run, and then when you put it on a timer, or you can manually stop it, and when it's done, it gathers all this data, and it tells you what the workload was trying to do, where it was bottlenecked, where it was limited. It's a very powerful application that is usually used by developers as they build their applications to kind of find weak spots. Where can we tweak performance and kind of profile it and improve things as much as possible. So now what's interesting about that is in order to do that, the VTune utility it's very architecture specific. So you can't really run VTune on an AMD Ryzen processor and get anything that makes any sense. But we could run it on Intel platform. So what we were able to do is basically, go through a bunch of games and then a bunch of non-games that are typical of what we see in our review and other people's reviews, and see where the profiles look. And if you scroll down, to that graph there, you'll see what this percentage that I'm looking at is part of what is called dependencies, like memory latency dependencies. So this essentially shows you what percentage of the clock cycles that occurred in your testing time was a thread waiting on a return memory access, right? It was waiting on latency for the memory read to come back, or write, I guess, to go away. And what you see is at the top, you see Ashes, Civ 6 is a little bit an outlier, but Deus Ex, Primal, all these games are in the 20s, almost up to 30% of memory latency dependency, with the exception of Civ 6, which is a unique case. But then if you look at the other applications, Audacity, BMW, Cinebench, the Blender test with BMW, Cinebench, Handbrake, these are all in the teens or lower. Audacity is significantly lower. And then you have this one really big outlier in WinRAR, that is unique in its kind of architectural, I guess, back software development side in terms of how the library files and that type of stuff work. But it's pretty clear by looking at this that, in general, games are more latency dependent than non-games, at least in these sets of applications that we have here, right? So knowing that and kind of knowing what we have seen with Ryzen 1080p gaming performance before, we basically went through and did some tests. So what I did is, on the next page, you'll see I kind of artificially increased the latency and timings of the Intel Core i7-7700K to, from CAS 2 to CAS 3, increase some of the other timings while keeping the memory frequency the same, just to show, okay, we're only changing the timings, but we did get an increase in our memory latency. Upwards of 13.8% slower in in-page, sequential 7.5%, and 13.8% in full random, 15% in in-page results. And so then what we did was we reran all the same tests, gaming and non-gaming tests, and wanted to see what scaling there was, right? And what we saw was, if you look at Ashes, Civ 6, Far Cry, Hitman, even Grand Theft Auto 5, we're talking about 6 up to 15% difference where it's running slower on the higher latency memory settings on the Intel platform. But then if you look at the general applications, you're looking at 1, 2, 3% at most, and then you have that outlier WinRAR, which again showed the higher latency dependency in the VTune results, and then we saw a 13% difference there. So again, this kind of like backs up the fact that, okay, games are actually more memory latency dependent than I thought, that I had ever really thought about, and general applications are not. So when you look at the gaming results that we've seen on AMD Ryzen processors, it kind of makes sense. Its memory latency is slower, and thus its gaming performance is slower. Now, it's important to point out that it's not always slower, because when you get to higher resolution, 25 by 16, 4K, the CPU has more time between its frames to wait for that memory latency. So even though those cycles still exist, where the latency, it's still waiting on memory access, memory reads, it's able to kind of quote unquote hide it, because it's just spinning its wheels waiting for the GPU to finish the extra workload it has now. So as you increase the resolution, you take the bottleneck away from the CPU, which we've always really known, but this gives you a way to kind of visualize it with a more specific data point in terms of memory latency. So it produced interesting results, right? And it wasn't anything that to be more critical of AMD or the product or anything like that. It was more of an investigative, like, why is this stuff happening? If you go down to the very last graph, it's worth pointing out the one that has its Sysoft Sanger memory latency again. It'll down a little bit further, Alan, where we have that one there. So we show the Ryzen 1800X DDR4 with the fast timings all the way. It was worth pointing out the Ryzen processor had faster timings in this kind of little experiment than the Intel processor did. As we increase memory frequency while keeping timings, about the same, actually the timings go up a little bit, the overall memory latency goes down. This again explains why Ryzen 7's gaming performance and Ryzen 5's gaming performance is better. It shows improvement at 1080p as you increase the memory speed, because you are inherently lowering the latency, right? Now, and that's also why it doesn't make up everything when you do it, because you can see that the memory latency does go down across the board, but it's not getting down to the Intel levels that we see on the 7700K. So a lot of detail in that write-up. I encourage you guys to go look it up. Again, it's more of a educational piece, kind of an interesting, yes, there I am on the beach discussing with this everybody, let's explore why this thing is happening. Like, AMD's not gonna be able to fix this through an architectural update in this generation, but you can see why AMD pushes for faster memory speeds, and it'll be curious to see how this maybe translates over to the server side, where memory latency may be important for some workloads as well, and they need to get, usually when we think of servers on the Intel side, they're running at like the slowest DDR4 memory speeds, right? Like you're not really seeing people push up into really high frequency DDR4 memory. That's not usually something you think of you have to do. But with the Ryzen platform or with the Zen architecture on EPYC, as it's now called, you may actually see that be more of a concern, or not more of a concern, but more of a drive for AMD to really improve that. A long opening discussion. Any comments from the gallery of people who have video that works?
It's a nice point of interest. It's a good set of data to see exactly where the kind of the bottlenecks in terms of latency come. I mean, it makes sense that games are more sensitive to it because it's a real-time simulation where scripted things happen, and it's going to have different workloads depending on what's showing up on the screen at different times. And the CPU just can't do any kind of prefetching for that. It just is an instruction. Here's a script. This action happens. The person moves the viewpoint to another area, clicks some buttons. Again, these are things the CPU can't kind of prefetch and look forward to as in other applications. So, I think games are still a really interesting application to use across, kind of the board in terms of CPU performance, because they're just so random. They're workloads that you can do some work on to make things or certain aspects of it run better, but it's all just so random because of inputs, scripting, and actions that happen on screen. And so this is kind of fascinating to see, actual numbers and data of this type come out that we can kind of judge these applications going forward with new and future CPU generations.
Well said, sir. All right, let's jump into some more of the AMD news. They had their financial analyst day this week, I guess yesterday, day before, I don't remember now. It's all blurred. Where they announced several interesting things. We'll start with EPYC, which is the brand that the Zen architecture will have for enterprise parts. And again, I everybody on this call, please correct me when I say something that is wrong, because I did not listen to the stream, and I'm depending on you guys and the posts that went up in my knowledge of this. So the Naples architecture that we've been talking about for a long time, AMD has been bragging about Naples, it being their reattempt to get into the enterprise market where they have like 0.5% market share and there's nothing but growth and it's high margin and all that type of stuff. The brand they picked is EPYC, EPYC. EPYC. I don't know what else to say about that. Alan, you're on one story too far ahead, or one, yeah.
Oh, I am?
Too far up there.
Yeah, that's the comparison story.
That's the benchmarks one. But so these are server processors up to 32 cores, 64 threads, 8-channel DDR4 memory, 128 PCI Express lanes per CPU. This is not really new information for that. 2-socket support, 32 TIMs of DDR4 on 16 channels of memory in a 2-socket system. It is a complete SoC with fully integrated high-speed I/O. It will use, when you do a 2-socket, it's using 64 lanes of each CPU for its Infinity Fabric communication between the two processors. And then you get 64 lanes per to actual connect to external devices. So look at that.
And you
picture.
can fit 2
Holy
heat sinks
moly.
on it.
Look at that. It
looks like an SSD.
Yeah, it's like a 2.5-inch CPU.
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane. Wow. Okay. And I don't know if I had a picture of it in any of our stories, but I've seen some pictures of the part delidded where there's actually 4 individual die on it. I would like to see the physical specifications of this part. So, yeah, AMD EPYC, 32 core, 64 threads. Let's see. They haven't announced the L3 cache size apparently, but 0.5 meg per core. You're talking about 16 megs of L2 cache, not 16 megs of L3, 16 megs of L2 cache. 1.4 gigahertz base clock and turbos of up to 2.8 gigahertz. So a little bit lower on the clock speeds. We kind of expected that with the core quantity in this. I will open this up for commentary or discussion on. Oh, actually, I guess let's talk about the next EPYC story as well before we do that. But they didn't talk a whole lot about this, but Pat Moorhead posted on Twitter a couple of brief but interesting benchmarks that AMD displayed, where they were pitting their 32 cores against two. Wait, what is this? Okay, so they were actually comparing it against a 2-socket system versus a 1-socket system. Okay, and that's pretty impressive. So they're comparing a 1-socket 32-core part against 24 cores in a 2-socket system from Intel with the Xeon E5 2650 V4. Showed some benchmarks, showed PCI Express connectivity. Looks pretty impressive. So about 9.5% faster on its single socket than Intel's dual socket. Now I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of this because I don't honestly have the breadth of knowledge on the Xeon product line to know, are there other processors in this price range that makes sense? But I'm guessing that they are comparing them specifically to that 2650 V4 because of its MSRP of 1170. So now I'll open up the floor and say, give me your commentary on what AMD has done, either with the name or with the actual product of EPYC.
Well, they snuck the Y in there, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to say about the name, honestly. I mean, it's fine. I'm sure Opteron sounded really weird when it was announced.
Sounded like crap.
It's just that it's like the name is a bit too ambitious. So like if this thing under delivers at all, then the jokes are just going to be that it's not that epic. Like it just opens them up for the possibility.
Not so epic. Yeah.
I mean, it's like when you name your kid the wrong name and people just got jokes, right?
It also just feels very like that would have been a cool name for the high-end desktop part, right? Yeah. For consumers. Like the high-end Ryzen part could have been called EPYC. It's more of a gamer aggressive type brand to me than a mission critical server platform.
Yeah, right? But Xeon I really want to walk great either.
Yeah. But people are used to it.
That's true.
I don't want to walk up to my CFO and say, look, we should really upgrade. There's a really good price for performance argument about getting EPYC processors, and the eyes will glaze over and I'll be asked to leave.
Yeah,
Naples,
I can see that.
But yeah, it's like EPYC, eh? Okay, sure,
Naples was fine. Like Naples would have been a great product name. Yeah. From a product perspective, I will say that I don't see any way AMD fails with this, right? Even if they are say they take 5% market share, they've quintupled what they had before, right? So if they're able to take more than that, 10% over the course of the next couple of years, this is a huge win for them with an architecture that is truly like built for it. So this is going to be a win. I don't see a way AMD doesn't succeed with this product line in this space, especially if you start looking at how some of the even AMD themselves up to 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, everyone was talking about ARM-based servers and how the small micro cores, a whole bunch of small micro cores were going to do this and that, and AMD had their K12 and it was going to do this. That has kind of subsided. I mean, it's not gone away completely, but it is not like the rage right now. It's not what people in the enterprise field are really discussing or excited about. And instead, it seems to be more back to more cores, more performance still better performance per watt, but more cores, and then use virtualization technology to really take advantage of it. And I think AMD is poised exceedingly well to do that with EPYC. I guess I had to say
the most interesting thing about EPYC is it's Infinity Fabric all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
It's each chip.
Meaning what?
Each individual chip is connected to the other through Infinity Fabric, just like the CCXs are. And so it's not like they go interchip communication through hypertransport and then interchip communication. It's all the same protocol, seems like. I don't know, have all the exact information, but it's all just Infinity Fabric all the way through.
So does that mean theoretically, even though the CCX to CCX gives you more penalty than what we're used to, overall it might give you less penalty compared to like a multi-core big Xeon CPU?
Especially on a dual socket motherboard.
Yeah, QPI in that's not...
It's good, but it's not that good.
Yeah.
It's outdated.
Yeah, and there is a noticeable hit, right? Like to jump over QPI, there's a noticeable performance hit. So
I would assume that I guess I don't know this, the inter-die fabric on the same processor is going to be faster than the Infinity Fabric between sockets that is using 64 lanes of PCI Express. It's not using PCIe protocol, but it's using those lanes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong, Josh, in that assumption that it would fundamentally would have to be slower?
Probably,
even though you have
we
four
don't
different
know.
dies on the same silicon, or not on the same silicon, but on the same.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense that intersilicon, going through a substrate is going to be slower. They have to clock it down from, whatever it is going to be 1200. But, Infinity Fabric doesn't run all that fast, and doing 1200 megahertz across, a substrate that is well designed is certainly feasible. So I couldn't tell you without AMD doing a deep dive in this with us.
Yeah. Hopefully soon.
It's 1200 megahertz, and that's not that much anymore.
Yep. Hey, when we get our hands on some server parts, we can run that same application and make an all new graph. All right, let's talk about so AMD Threadripper, AMD Ryzen Threadripper, which is also a real brand that AMD is sticking with. This one I have known about for a little bit, and I thought it was the code name, and then as we got closer, like, oh no, we're going to use that, and I was like, no, you're not really. Like, come on, you're not really going to use Threadripper.
You guys are kidding, right?
But they did. It's the Ryzen Threadripper. This is their answer to the HEDT platform from Intel. So Broadwell E, Skylake X coming up, all that type of stuff. Where this is basically the server part brought down to consumers and able to it's gonna kick some ass in some pretty impressive places. This is up to 16 cores, 32 threads. Ryzen Threadripper coming summer 2017. I don't think they gave any more specifics than that, but there have been some leaks out from WCCF Tech and stuff. I guess AMD didn't actually officially talk about much on this, right? Did they talk about memory channels or anything like that, or is this all coming from the WCCF story?
It's all that sources WCCF.
Yeah, quad channel DDR4, but we'll see.
Yeah. If these numbers are right, these clock speeds are impressive. Up to 3.9 gigahertz with a 16 core part, 3.5 to 3.9. The TDP is pretty high, 155. I love the idea of a 4,094 pin package.
It's a lot of pins.
They're still going to use pins for this, huh? They're not going to shift over to the...
No, I think they're using LGAs. This would be LGA.
Okay.
Yeah, that picture. So the EPYC part she was holding up was clearly an LGA package, and they've been using LGA on Opterons for a while as well. So I'd assume they would do that here. I mean, think of a standard ATX motherboard with a socket for that on it, and then where do you put
the cards?
I mean, can you put 8 DIMM slots on that? I don't know if you can.
In an ATX,
it's not going to come in the micro ATX form factor because half of it would be the chip.
It would wait. Yeah, it would be chip.
Threadripper Mini ITX.
It'd be the chip and 8 sticks of RAM, and that's it. Like, There is no PCI slot.
You don't need graphics cards.
No.
So I mean, what's interesting about this is that the Threadripper doesn't address any single threaded performance issues, right? It's still the exact same architecture. This is simply like death by 1,000 threads of anything that's threaded. This is gonna wipe the floor with current options, right? Broadwell LE is going to be destroyed with its 10 cores versus the 16 cores on this. There's a lot of rumors. We'll talk about one with Intel flying around about what they're going to do for the revamp of this. But Threadripper is a real thing. We don't have any performance issues and or like claims, and we also don't have any prices or anything. Guys, discuss this for a second. I have to go open a door. Hang on. Who's going to buy Threadripper?
Now, I actually have a question.
But I don't sew anymore.
So Threadripper's on a 4096 pin package, and Epic's. Now,
Epic is. Threadripper's going to be 19 something.
So it isn't on the same socket.
I don't think so.
Probably not. It's the X299, ain't it?
I guess.
Well, maybe. But they're also rumored to be released in the massive 4094 pin package, same as Naples.
Yeah.
AKA Epic. Huh.
Yeah.
I always thought it was going to be. Hell if I know then.
I'm back.
That's a lot of.
He's back.
Yeah, I mean, didn't they say it was a pin compatible package, but there wasn't anything out if it was actually going to be compatible between the two chips.
How much
it's
are those
pin compatible
motherboards?
for Sebastian?
How much are those boards going to be with the 4090 whatever pin array? LGA.
Imagine the RMA rates.
Yeah. It's not.
I bent one pin on the board.
I've got to think that the
SIFs.
Threadripper and the initial Naples is going to be in the 2000 to 2500 pin, using LGA area, because I don't know, that Epic, that's just a huge jump up.
I agree.
I don't know.
I agree.
Nobody tells me anything.
I'm excited to test it out. Like I think it's going to be. I don't know. It's going to be interesting because this is going to be out. I guess I don't know. I don't know who's going to be out first, right? Intel could release their Skylake X parts before this comes out or after, and it'll be
they bumped
to
it up,
see
but it's
how the
still
back
June.
goes.
They bumped it up. It was Digitimes today. As I scroll down to find out, Basin Falls, they're bumping up to late June or early August.
That's going to be super interesting. I cannot wait to see like Intel's first response since Ryzen's come out, and now that AMD kind of jumped the gun and showed off Threadripper before Skylake X as well. Should be pretty interesting.
I'm right. I got them backwards again. AMD is the X399. Intel's the X299.
Yep.
Because that's really easy to tell apart.
Thanks, guys. This is great.
Yeah.
Good job, everybody. Good
Now
job.
they're just going to keep leapfrogging each other on that first digit.
499 is going to come from Intel next.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the
the
third
999
AMD announcement. Third AMD announcement was the Radeon Vega Frontier Edition, which is, I assume, made from log cabins. Maybe they do some
it's the
prospecting.
final frontier.
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't say that. It only says Frontier Edition. I think Davy Crockett. I think 49ers. I think Sifton for Gold. Those types of things. That's not what this is.
Lewis Clark.
No.
Going into the great unknown.
So Raja announces Vega.
That's a saucy
Frontier
pose that
Edition.
Raja has there.
Yeah, he's styling there.
It is.
That is saucy.
It does look like he's voguing a little bit, does it not? Yeah. So this is the, quote, world's most powerful solution for machine learning and advanced visualization aimed to empower the next generation of data scientists and visualization professionals. So this is not a gaming product. But I will say, based on those pictures, it looked kind of awesome. I am a fan of the ID in this. It looks like a water-cooled and an air-cooled variant. Did we learn much about what the specifications are of this? 64 compute units. What's that put us in shader processors? 64 times what? 128 on theirs, I think. Regardless, single precision compute, which is kind of important, is around 13 teraflops. Half precision, about double that, as we would expect. Pixel fill rate, 90 gigapixels per second. 16 gigs of high bandwidth cache, otherwise known as HBM2. Taking advantage of the high bandwidth cache controller that AMD has, they could address more memory than that. 480 gigabytes per second of memory, which I believe is the exact same memory bandwidth that Fiji has. I have to double check this. But the specifications are interesting in this because 13 teraflops is high, but it's not as high as I expected, I guess. Like if you take a look at the Titan X Pascal, for example, it is rated at at 11 teraflops. And it has 480 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth on its GDDR5X memory. And actually, the R9 Fury X actually has 512 gigabytes per second. So the memory bandwidth is actually lower on these parts than on the Fury X. So curious on what you guys think. Do we assume this is the lower clocked version of Vega for enterprise, or not enterprise, but like high-end compute? It's kind of hard for me to figure that would be the case, and considering there's a water-cooled variant in the screenshot, right?
Yeah.
Quick question.
I do like the glowy R's. Those are pretty cool.
That's nice. Quick question. Refresh my memory. HBM2 can have a max of 32 gigs in its current configuration. So it seems to me that they're using 2 stacks instead of potentially 4. And that's why we're seeing half the theoretical bandwidth of HBM2.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah, and that
would give more room on the interposer. That would give more room on an interposer for a larger GPU die. In theory,
AMD likes large dies right now.
Everybody does.
Yeah, large everything. The pictures we've seen of them holding are definitely 2 stacks of memory. So yeah, we're probably looking at, that's a good point. Two 8 gig stacks of HBM2, 240 gigs per second per stack. So in theory, you can get up to 960 gigabytes per second, which is, I believe, just about what the NVIDIA Tesla V100. I think it was rated at 900 gigabytes per second. Yeah, so it's got 4 stacks. So that's true. That's probably what we're looking at here as to why. Now, the interesting thing is, I mean, it's still lower than the Fury X. They're basically saying that we didn't need that much memory bandwidth with the Fury X. They can basically prove that's the case through all their modeling, and now they've had all these workloads in place for that long with that hardware. So, regardless, specs don't matter. It's how they're utilized. Specs like memory bandwidth. The 13 teraflops is interesting because it puts it higher than the Titan X Pascal, but isn't the Titan XP, like the actual one that was called the Titan XP, already, wasn't it higher than that as well? It was rated at 12 teraflops, apparently. So 12 teraflops. This one is 13. Yeah, I think that puts AMD in the spot they need to be. And I do like the R cubes in the corner. I had some emails from people complaining about it, that it looked a little bit like IKEA furniture in that picture. But I actually am a fan of the design and style in that. So hopefully that transfers over to the consumer space as well. Any more thoughts on Vega David Crockett edition before we move on? I know it's started edition. Late. So
I would say something about a specific type of hat was popular during the time, but could be non-PC.
I already did in the chat.
Okay.
Consider it covered.
Thank you so much for leaving it in text form only, and not audio.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy, tell me about these the rumored Core i9 Skylake X, Kaby Lake X. Does this look like it's have enough to compete against the potential of a Threadripper?
Well, I mean, for one thing, they've ensured that naming schemes are not going to be confusing enough by adding an i9 to the family and mixing it up, because essentially Skylake X will be the i9s, Kaby Lake X will be the i7s, so you'll still have them going at the same time. Core counts are interesting. They're going to be big, but this leak didn't really specify exactly how many you can expect to see. However, with the boost clocks, pretty much across the board, you're seeing stuff that's running faster than AMD's Threadripper. The L3 cache, we know the size of at 16.5 meg for the largest one, the 7920X, but we don't know the other caches. PCI lanes line up 44, which is decent. All the TDPs sit a little bit below the equivalent from Threadripper. So it's an interesting mix, especially considering, you know, how accurate is this? When you're seeing people saying, okay, the 7920X is going to have 12 cores, 24 threads, you don't actually see that written down very often. So it's likely. It's not quite up to the size of Threadripper, but it will be interesting to see. And as I said a little bit earlier, I alluded to, these have been bumped up. So as opposed to seeing them at the beginning of next year, which was expected because AMD is really pushing forward on this quite nicely, we're probably going to see these, towards the middle of the summer. So we're going to know sooner than we thought. And it's going to get even more confusing between the i9s, the i7s, the i5s, and the i3s, which might not even be of the same generation and may or may not be an X or a K, because let's toss more letters into there just to make it fun.
Yeah, if the Kaby Lake X architecture, if the Kaby Lake X architecture is a 7740K, yeah.
But the Skylake X are the double X.
Yeah, but what about that 7740K? Because isn't that overclocked and want to be throttling more? Does Intel do an internal memo? Please don't actually clock these this high.
I mean, if these specs are true, though, the 7740K becomes the new highest clock speed part, I think.
Yep.
Still got the same PCIe lanes, a little bit higher TDP. I mean, this basically just makes it would make the 7740K like the best gaming processor, but it doesn't really change the story that exists today. But it does raise the price of that platform, because now you have to buy into the X299 chipset as opposed to just Z270 or Z170. But then, the 7920X, 7900X, those are 10-core parts, 12-core parts. Are they going to stay at the 10-core? And then, obviously, the most important thing will be the pricing, right? Are they still going to try to charge $1,700 for their top-end part when know damn well because AMD is not going to do that?
No, but Intel has always led their flagship i7 at $1,000. Well, $999. So what do you do with an i9? Do you now lower the i7s to in between where the i5s and the i7s sit now, or do you push the i9s up past 1,000 into Xeon pricing?
No. Well, I mean, keep in mind the 10-core Broadwell E was $1,700.
True.
And the 8-core was supposed to be $1,000. So they've already crossed that threshold. I don't think the Core i7 7740K changes much. You maybe make that $400 instead of $340 for the 7700. I don't know. It really just depends on how aggressive Intel wants to be, right? How much are they willing to sacrifice a little margin to one up AMD, as AMD is kind of spreading its wings on its revamped architecture.
I don't know if they can afford that, though. You know, Intel is pretty strapped for cash. They might not be able to get into a price war.
True.
Yeah.
True. It's very true. It'll be tough.
I hope they don't make that move. But then again, I like to see cheaper CPUs. So,
in the interest of time, I'm going to run through some of these other items pretty quickly. So, if you guys, anybody has anything in particular they want to focus on, please let me know. Like I see, Alan, in here you had the WD 10 terabytes, but let's.
That's just a news announcement.
Okay. Scott published 2 stories that are related. Khronos Group published finalized OpenCL 2.2 specifications, which OpenCL, very important for compute. What's maybe more interesting out of this is that if you look at the roadmap from Khronos, they're actually merging OpenCL and Vulkan into a single API. The quote from the press release was, "We're also working to converge with and leverage the Khronos Vulkan API, merging advanced graphics and compute into a single API." And he was able to get a little clarification. They've made the decision to converge its roadmap with Vulkan and use Vulkan as the basis for the next generation of explicit compute APIs. So it's interesting because this basically puts it on a similar footing as the DirectX system, where everything, direct compute, direct 3D, all this stuff is kind of combined into DirectX. Very easy for developers to count on one being there if the other is there, I guess. And then it also gives hardware vendors one specific target that they have to meet across the board. By combining Vulkan and OpenCL, it assures that compute and graphics capabilities will move in tandem for this API, these sets of APIs, I guess, at this point. Scott did a great write-up on this, on what OpenCL could give to Vulkan and what this kind of creates.
It creates synergy. It's a paradigm shift in programming technology.
It's epic.
Sure.
But
wait,
with
sorry.
an I.
Wrong thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Y is trademarked.
Yeah, and Scott does point out that the Khronos Group has not provided a timeline for the change. It's a roadmap declaration that they're basically saying this is going to happen. It makes total sense, and it does mean that Vulkan will not just be a one-off kind of funny named API. It will be here for the foreseeable future, and it will be very different in the coming years than it looks today. Pretty cool stuff. This is another story that I think is actually really cool that we're not going to have enough time to devote attention to. Tim wrote up. Tim's one of those lucky people that happen to be in a city that could get the YouTube TV service already. So I challenged him to write up a story on his first impressions on the sign-up process, what channels worked for him. This is a really compelling option because, first of all, like YouTube reliability, it's pretty good. It wasn't always great. We depend on it. It's been pretty damn reliable in terms of live streaming, in terms of, it's not very often that YouTube is down. But for $35 a month, you get, for him at least, I think he's in the Chicago market, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. You get ABC, CBS, Fox, NBC, right? So right there, like the locals is a key for this type of stuff, because if you look at DirecTV Now and those things, they only have locals, and there's those very specific handful of markets as well. But then you get a great lineup of normal cable, optional add-ons, Showtime. They don't have HBO, I guess, as part of this. It doesn't look like. You can always get that individual, but $35 a month is pretty compelling. Again, that's what I think DirecTV Now is going for, one of its medium packages or lower package. But based on Tim's first impressions, it seems pretty good. Did anybody else give this a read and kind of see what he thought? And I know, Alan, this is something you had signed up for as well, hoping to get a shot.
I'm on the notification thing, but it's not. We don't got it yet here, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It looks good. I really like the idea of how many, like, I forget how many devices it spans across for that subscription, but it's like it's enough to where it immediately looked like it was a good deal. I was like, oh yeah, like that basically covers like the family.
I think it was like 6. Or
yeah, it was
like
something like it wasn't just devices. It was how many of your YouTube accounts it would span across. Like so, I think that's how it worked.
Oh.
So yeah, so like basically you would your wife, your kids, if they had YouTube accounts, like you would add those to your thing, and for that same $35 a month, basically everybody that's in your house, like a reasonably sized family, just has it. Like just has, on whatever device, wherever they're, kids up in their room, they just want to watch the TV, they just fire that up. It's already on their account. And they just, pick something to watch. I really, really like the idea of it. I just wish we had it.
Yeah. In typical Tim fashion, he has a TLDR at the bottom of his story about what he loved, what issues he had, or what he wanted to see improved. It looks like a really interesting direction. I as with most Google services, I question their long-term dedication to it. Right?
They kind of dug that hole for themselves Google, with all the other projects that they've canned over the years.
Or trenches in this case.
Yeah.
True.
With their
Google's very willing to try anything, but they're also willing to like leave things behind. And that's not necessarily bad always, but like if you suddenly become dependent on them and they change or do things differently.
This seems this seems like a large enough undertaking and a big enough thing to where people are going to be canceling their TV stuff, right? Like they're going to be moving, if they're in the area and Google says, hey, we have this. And people are like, now they're doing stuff where they're actually shifting and doing large budget related changes to shift to this. So like they'd really like, it would be a huge trench that they would dig for themselves if they killed this one. I
understand. However, as somebody who had transferred my number to Google Voice at one point, I will tell you that they are more than willing to take something incredibly important to you and totally screw it up and leave it to die and wither until you transfer your number back out.
That's true.
But still, again, there's lots of other services out here that you can just cancel this and try something new. So YouTube TV is what it's called. Check it out if it's available in your area. I think they give you like a 2-week trial or something like that as well. But I know it's not available for Alan or me, probably not in Wyoming, and definitely not in Canada, would be my guess. Just a thought.
I wouldn't mind if they I don't necessarily even need the local channels. Like I know that's the reason why it takes them longer to roll out. Like they want you to have like your local news and whatever available as part of the lineup. But heck, I'd like to just have like the main networks. Not even worry about them locally, right?
Well, I mean, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox are considered the main networks, right? And that's your locals.
Yeah. But I think they try to give you, they want to give you ads. People. They want to give you the local feed so that you're getting the ads or whatever that's in the feed, like the commercials.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's more of a licensing and an agreement with either the affiliates of the global networks. Tim does point out in the chat that DirecTV Now, the special is over, and the package that's similar to what YouTube TV is now is $65 a month. And they do have the DVR service. They don't have DVR, but they have 72-hour rollback, but it's pretty limited. So in terms of value, YouTube TV is there. They allow 6 accounts, 3 simultaneous streams inside that $35 a month. And every account gets their own DVR. So that's actually pretty awesome.
Yeah, but you said it's 65 now, not 35?
No, the DirecTV one that I compared it to,
okay.
that I thought was 35 is actually 65 now. It's like initial launch promo is over.
Yeah, that's I always hated that about DirecTV. They always sell you on the promo, and then the promo's over, and then you got to like call and threaten to cancel, in order to get another promo, right? And
oh yes,
it's a perpetual like begging for a promo or I'm going to leave thing.
This is very typical. Yeah. This is why I don't have DirecTV. Normal DirecTV, I guess, anymore. So go check out that story by Tim. Very good write-up on that. And I haven't really seen many pundits kind of commenting on the YouTube TV stuff, so really good to see that there. Also, really quickly, Google Daydream Standalone VR headsets were announced today at Google I/O. They're using the Snapdragon 835 mobile platform for that, meaning that essentially this is a VR headset that is not tethered to a PC and also doesn't require you to slot in a cell phone. It is kind of a standalone unit. The advantages of which are you don't have to worry about if your phone's charged. It's a separate device. In theory, you can have better performance because there's better thermals capable there. You can have a bigger battery, so it'll last longer. But it still uses the same kind of inside-out tracking methodologies. It still uses the same technology that we've seen in some of these demo units. But with Google behind it, it should get a much more dramatic push, I think, out of the gate. And I think Google announced HTC was going to make one of these based on this reference platform. So that's pretty interesting. And I would actually, I think I saw somebody on Twitter mention this, so I can't claim the original origin of the idea, but I'd love to see a unit where the headset has the option to be connected up to a PC if you wanted to run those games, essentially, and then had the option to just use the internal hardware with like the Android ecosystem, the Daydream ecosystem. I don't know if there's any reason Google wouldn't allow that, but HTC with their the HTC Vive background, I could see them maybe figuring out a way to do that if the 6 degrees depth of field type stuff, or 6 degrees of freedom, thing is accurate and fast enough to emulate what HTC Vive does with the Lighthouse system. I think would be a pretty compelling product, because this is still going to be a fairly expensive device. Like it's high-end cell phone hardware plus a high-resolution screen, all the gyros and all that type of stuff, or Euros.
It's not made of cardboard.
And it's not made of cardboard. Yes.
Yeah.
So in theory, this is probably a $500 or more device. If you could double use it and say have a tethered mode, which is essentially like a USB cable and an HDMI cable, or maybe we even get lucky and we get like 60 gigahertz wireless or something crazy like that, that would be pretty awesome. But they didn't announce that. They just announced a reference platform, availability by the end of this year, and HTC was their partner. So I think that would be cool. Where are we at now? Let's take a look at... All right, I don't know anything about this. Bad news, Battletech fans. I assume this...
Good news.
I didn't even click on it yet. I'm assuming this is a Jeremy story.
It's a Jeremy story.
Good news.
Tell me about it, Jeremy.
Yes. So, and I'm a backer of this, like, as of the day that they launched the damn thing, because I've been desperately aching for a Battletech game for a long time and don't want to put out the $2 million to get a bunch of miniatures. So they had a wildly crazy Kickstarter campaign. It went out beautifully. They started having to invent stretch goals because they're like, crap, guys, this is impressive. They just got Paradox to sign on to be the publisher. So God knows how much that costs them, but Paradox Interactive is one of my favorite publishers because, I mean, just 2 weeks ago, they pushed out yet another giant expansion pack for a 4-year-old game, for Europa Universalis 4. They're just really good. They constantly push out patches, but they also push out simultaneously. They will do a paid-for DLC that vastly expands the entire scope of the game, and a free patch for anyone who doesn't want to feel like buying it that gives you a less expansive upgrade. They do it for Europa Universalis, Crusader Kings, Stellaris, just about bloody anything that they do. So this could well mean that we'll see the Battletech launch and see newer stuff coming as the years go over. It's kind of exciting, and for those of you in the beta, those of you that backed it, the beta kicks off at the beginning of June. If you didn't back it, I did link to a place where you can toss some money in, because as much as I hate pre-ordering, I don't mind throwing money at games I want to see happen. And honestly, I've only been burned a couple of times. It's not been too bad, but that could just be because I play weird games, like, say, turn-based Battletech. It's going to be fun.
That is weird.
That sounds amazing.
What?
I mean, it looks really cool.
Oh,
Well, and because it's turn-based, the cover works. Running now gives you an evasive thing. It's much more like the tabletop.
All it's missing is VR.
all right, Alan. You
And yes, there is
Alan,
death
you wanna
from
tell me
above
about,
melee
oh,
attacks.
All right.
Alan, you want to tell us about 10 terabyte hard drives?
Yeah, sure.
They got new labeled.
I mean, we kind of knew it was coming, because there have been HGST HE10s, which is just the Hitachi 10 terabyte helium-filled drive for their enterprise drives, and then Western Digital started shipping a 10 terabyte gold, which is basically kind of sort of a pseudo rebrand of the HE10. And it was just a matter of time before we saw, 10 terabyte trickle down to the Reds and the Red Pros. And that's what happened. So there were previously helium-filled 8 terabyte Red and Red Pro, and now there's a 10 terabyte Red and Red Pro. MSRPs look a little pricey. It's almost $500 for the Red, $533 for the Red Pro.
That is.
But Western Digital MSRPs usually tend to be kind of high, and then once it actually starts shipping and it's on the market, like there's the market price, tends to fall in line with with the cost per gig of the smaller drives. So because I think the 8 terabyte ones are running like $350 or something or so, somewhere around there. So I'm
gonna be honest, like the more I see these giant hard drives and the more I become dependent on a 500 gigabyte laptop as my only primary computing device that I'm doing work on.
Yeah.
The idea of needing terabytes and terabytes of storage becomes more difficult for me to wrap my head around, I guess. I say that, but like our office has, how big is that array that we built at the office?
It's not huge. It's like
18 terabytes,
16 or 18, something like that. Yeah.
How big is your,
I guess
your
that's
Steam cache?
We were actually trying to run the Steam, like a Steam caching server thing on that file server, so we can download our Steam games.
It turns out it wasn't any faster than just downloading it from Steam again.
Yeah, it might have actually been a little bit slower.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I think
Suspicious?
I think the caching software itself was just like sort of a limit. I just think it wasn't as
I think for most people, downloading the games at 40 megabytes per second would be a drastic increase in speed.
Yeah.
For us, it was a decrease in speed.
It cut our speed in like
unrelated to this hard drive.
Yeah. But I mean, something like this, even if you're not in need of huge amounts of storage, like to make a huge array of these things, bigger drives like this lets you get just like a 2-bay NAS or something and just have a simple mirror.
True.
Right? Now you're not worried about RAID 5 or any of that other stuff. You just have 2 drives. If one of them fails, you just put another drive in, that sort of thing. And it's not, it makes it a much simpler solution, and you're spending a lot less money on the NAS itself, right? Just for a 2-bay. You can get a 2-bay Synology for just like $300 or so, maybe even less. Silly to put, $800 or almost $1,000 worth of drives into that, $200 or $300 NAS, but hey, you'll have, 10 terabytes of redundant storage sitting right there, which is plenty for most people, right? Like that should future-proof you for a while.
Maybe not Josh.
Well, it'll future-proof you, but not for nearly as long as you think it will.
That's true. You just tend to naturally fill everything, fill all the things.
I feel like that's the case with like, you buy a new house or you buy a new office. Suddenly you just have more things filling the spaces. It's odd.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I found just with just my own personal life array things is that once you have just a large array that you put together, you start realizing that, oh crap, I have this thing stored on this drive over here, and I have stuff stored all over. Hold on a second. I have stuff. Alex, switch the camera. Dang it, I'm talking over here. You just start finding stuff in your house, and you're like, hey, I should just put that on the NAS, right? And you just start dumping. It just basically becomes a dumping ground for stuff. And then now since it's not like the PC that you're using all the time and sitting in front of, it's somewhere on your network, then it's like there's even less incentive for you to go and like try to clear out stuff or make more room or whatever. And it just turns into, oh, NAS is almost full. Let me just add another drive. And, you know, I think I'm up to like 14 6TB Reds in my basement or something crazy like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just keep throwing another, you know, it's like,
crazy.
let me go get on Amazon and get another 6TB drive again. I'm almost full. I guess being married to a digital archivist and being a storage editor myself is a, you know,
Bad combination.
combo.
a formula for trouble. Bad combination. Anyway.
It's like when a sadist meets a masochist.
It's a match
before we
made
get to our
in
hardware software picks, I will mention Nicholas Rupp. Thank you. Edited their pledge from $1 to $3 per month in our Patreon. Let me go in here and make sure we got everybody. Yeah, Nicholas, thank you very much for your update there. Greatly appreciated. Now we're going to get to our hardware software picks of the week so we can get this damn show done. I don't have one except to all those TV shows, all the commercials you see for Sprint, Verizon, AT&T, who talk about how great their cell phone networks are. In truth, they really mostly suck. And the reason that's the case is like a drive from Orlando to Panama City Beach has a surprisingly high number of dead zones in it. What it was like Verizon says they cover 99.8% of the country or something like that. I seem to be in that 0.2% more often than most. I don't know if you guys have the same experience as this. But no, that's true. No, that's right. They don't claim 99.9% of America. They claim 99% of the population, I guess. So if you drive a place where nobody lives, they don't care nearly as much.
I've always thought AT&T seemed to be pretty good about at least having towers along highways. You know,
here's how you notice this. Here's the best way to notice how deficient cell networks can be. It is you're driving with a kid streaming video. In the back.
Then you immediately know when it's down. Yeah.
Yes. Every hiccup, you know. If it's buffering, you know. And so
give me the indicators.
As soon as you get off 75.
What are the indicators you've experienced recently?
Screaming children.
It's like canary in the coal mine type of thing, right? When the kids start screaming, it's time to find more data. So it was an interesting thing. It's Studio Alex, you are correct. It is a first world problem. But it is one that's like we often talk in these great altruistic, completely wireless societies of things. And there were several places where I looked down at my phone and I was at 1x connectivity. And it's not like I'm driving out through the mountains in Wyoming or something like that. I'm driving through the panhandle of Florida. So I don't know. That's my I'll use my hardware software pick of the week to complain. So I did that.
A Florida man was out there. He stripped the cell tower down and sold it for spare scrap metal.
Great. Josh, I think I know what your pick is.
You know, if you're going to pre-order something, at least, you know, it's going to be good. And I think this is. Dirt 4 looks sweet. I've been playing Dirt Rally nonstop for years now. And this builds upon it extensively. And I think it's going to be a really good title. It's $59.99, which is not great because, you know, if you'd gotten in first with Dirt Rally, and I think they offered it for either $33 or that very first weekend for $26, and you had to kind of suffer through early access. Boy, you know, that was the deal of the century. This one, not so much. It's a fully featured, polished product coming out. They've done extensive testing on it. You know, it's an extended Dirt Rally, and so, you know, a lot more content, a lot more stuff to do. They have the kind of, you know, infinite stages thing where you can create your own. Well, you can kind of create your own stages, but they're generated by the machine, They're near infinite in the amount that you can have. So it's just not the same races over and over and over again. You can do things like, you generate a stage, you really liked it, you can save it, and you can share it with your friends. Or at least share it with people who hate you and want to beat you. But
can you
that's
drive
what you can do
in it?
You might.
Yeah,
be able to.
Ryan really likes to drive backwards.
Yeah, I'll ask Paul. Maybe he can, write a little patch for you. That
I want that in there, and like maybe even call it the Ryan mode or something like that, right?
Sure.
Yeah, make it a non-default setting, right? Because that would be crazy.
That would be nice.
So
anyway.
we should just start calling it that when you're doing multiplayer and there's that one Joker that's driving backwards on the track. You should just call it like being shrouded or something. When that guy hits you,
Oh, look, there's
there's that guy shrouding again. Damn it.
Yeah.
yeah. All right, I'm okay with that. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Who's up next, Jeremy? What do you got?
All right. Well, when you get kicked out of Dirt 4 for hacking your car and get called out on cheating, how about hacking the car you actually own? The two car security experts, Charlie Miller and Chris Velazek, of taking over the Jeep Cherokee.
Where's that dude going down below?
Right. Well,
it is called hacking.
Suits.
They're
both shaved. They're probably wearing Adidas. So you know where that's going to go.
Yeah.
So these are the guys who hacked the Jeep on the highway and got it to slow down and go off. So they've gathered together all of the vulnerabilities they've found, not just for Jeep, but for just about any bloody car out there that has a CAN bus and ridiculously unsecured software on it, which is like all of them. So at least this way you can take a look at it, identify what the vulnerabilities on your car are, and decide to play with them or not if you feel like it. Or maybe, start screaming at people to say, maybe not having the feature where they can lock me in the car and cause an accident might be worth investing in research. It's going to be interesting. It's fairly recent that this has come out, so you're going to see a lot of data mining out of it. We may start seeing ratings of most secure car, or car least likely to kill you if someone with unsecured Wi-Fi gets at you. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's unfortunate, but true.
And as a guy who drives a Tesla, you should be worried.
What if they encrypt your major functions? If you want to unlock your air conditioning, you need to send 5 Bitcoins to...
Yep. For 2 Bitcoins, you can steer left.
Wait, how much
For
is
10, you can both steer left
like
and right.
$800, isn't it?
Yeah. How much is air conditioning worth to you?
I'm just waiting for the version of ransomware that like you have to pay with Bitcoin or your Tesla will drive off the road. Like while you're in the Tesla.
Wait.
Hurry up! You have 10 seconds to make this decision.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like
yeah.
Wait till the vendors.
Hope you're not in a dead zone, so you can't upload the.
Oh
money
darn!
To it.
Oh no! Now the kid's screaming, and we're stuck in an episode of Speed.
What do you do?
Now the actual manufacturers at some point, probably sooner than later, are actually going to have unlockables.
Yeah.
Well, they already do. Tesla does this. Tesla has unlockables. You can unlock a bigger battery for $10,000.
Turbo mode, isn't it?
So.
Yeah, they were over provisioning packs in some of the Tesla models. Yeah, that's a thing.
So it was a software unlock on the same hardware.
Yeah. You got the bigger pack with the car. You just paid 10 grand less. If you wanted to use all the capacity, you paid the extra 10. Autopilot's the same thing. The cars are coming with the autopilot hardware. You don't have to buy it with autopilot, but you pay for it. You could pay for it after the fact as an upgrade. So it came with all the hardware. It's just you're just missing the bits.
Right.
Actually, you're just missing like one bit.
Yep. Just the flag.
Literally some flag somewhere in the firmware that's just like, whoop. Okay.
So download the research, build yourself a CAN interface, and start unlocking extras on your car.
Yeah.
Speaking of, Alan, your pick?
This is not to unlock an extra. This is the lower tech version.
That's one of those spinner things, isn't it?
No. This is totally not that. So there's these guys. I've been following this Kickstarter thing for a while. I'm tempted to order it myself because I'm actually like, it's not a gimmicky thing, even though it really looks like a gimmicky thing. But basically, these guys are making nanoparticles that it's a very small amount of them. You don't need a lot. You add it in with an oil change. It's supposed to be good for 40,000 miles because they are nanoparticles engineered to be metal adherent on one side and super slick on the other. So the idea is these things will float around on your engine, find all of the bare metal surfaces, stick to all of them, and the side that sticks is the only one that can stick. Meanwhile, the other side, now is exposed outward from the metal surface, is like super, super slippery, right? And especially once these things start bonding to both sides, both metal objects that are sliding against each other, now it's super slick surface to super slick surface. Like, so if you were a car guy like 20, 25, 30 years ago and you're following like all the synthetic stuff and, ooh, this comes with PTFE or this comes with, buckyballs or whatever, basically like, because they were just, carbon structures that were shaped like really tiny little ball bearings that, would cause things to glide over each other. This is like the next version of that. This is just like, right, coat the surface with a super slick compound. And, their claims are basically, they're not claiming like enormous increases in power or anything crazy like that or any magical kind of things, but they are talking about like, significantly reducing the wear in the engine. And, it does help like fill some of the gaps of things. So like, your compression will go up a little bit and since you're making everything super slick, all the movable surfaces or surfaces that's like, sliding against each other, their efficiency claims are 6 to 8%, and they're going as far as claiming to know that like within 15 minutes of you adding this to an older engine that had some older engines just are like a little bit more noisy, they're claiming that you will be able to hear that the engine is quieter after like within 15 minutes of adding this to an engine. So I mean, that's really telling. When it gets to a point where you add a very small amount of liquid to something and it makes that noticeable of a change, that's kind of a big indicator that it's succeeding in doing something, right? I mean, it's only like a couple of ounces of liquid in this little syringe-looking thing, and you're adding it to like, 4 quarts, 5 quarts of oil, and for it to make any kind of noticeable impact audibly, that's got to be doing something successfully.
I wonder right? if they're claiming that on Flat Tappet or Roller Follower. Or...
they're not like being really. They're just
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary claims.
Yeah, and it's not super expensive. I mean, given how much of an amount of liquid you get, it's kind of pricey. But let's see, what's the early bird? Where's the early bird that's like still going? I thought there was like a.
It's on to the right.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking. There's it's rolled off of the thing. So the if you just want to put it in a car and have it last 40,000 miles, just one car worth right now is like $75.
That's
$75 retail is $99.
I mean, an oil change. The oil you buy for an oil change right now, if you're getting any kind of decent oil, is like $20-$30.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a couple oil changes worth of money, but it's supposed to be good for 40K because once it's bonded with everything and you do your next oil change, it's not like, oh, the stuff's gone, right? Like I used to use this PTFE based like additive, and every time I would do oil changes, and I have to spend an extra couple of bucks to buy this can of stuff, but every time I do my oil change, like it's gone, it just went away.
Right.
It went out with the oil, so you have to go buy more of the additive. This stuff is supposed to just like stick around. So like I'm gonna get it.
All right.
And then we'll see.
All right.
Let's get some.
Maybe we'll get some. Alex,
we have an SPL meter.
We have an SPL meter.
This is not the car show.
Well, okay.
Talk about this.
No, I'm just picturing him blowing an engine.
I'm
just picturing you blowing an engine, and the next thing you know, the International Space Station is radioing. Yeah, we've got what looks like a rod from a late model Mustang entering low Earth orbit.
Yeah, that's Alex's Mustang.
That's slippery stuff.
It just slid right off of the side of the space station. We don't understand. Like it didn't even leave a dent. Like it must have been coated in something magical.
Okay, guys, that's it. We're done. That's the end of the podcast. I'm calling it. That is episode 450. Find all the show notes, all the links to the stories we talked about at pcper.com/podcast. It's where you can find subscription links, video, Patreon, all the stuff we talked about here today will be there in ways to follow. Make sure you're getting successive episodes of this amazingly fun, informative car show, PC Hardware podcast. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Even though that picture, if you're watching the video version, is not me currently today, it is me at some point. And I'm not on that beach, but I will hopefully be at a beach tomorrow, weather permitting. So I will see you next time, guys. I'm Ryan Trout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom. Hope you get cell signal.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
Good night, everybody. I'm waiting.
If you enjoyed this content, consider supporting in-depth technical content by contributing at patreon.com/PCPer.